Hello, this is Chris Heasley with the Chris Heasley Radio Show, and we have a very special edition tonight. This edition, it was sort of a request by the communities of Fort Bend and Harris County. There's a hot issue on the front of everyone's mind. We are 2 weeks into President Trump's second administration. President Trump, 45-47, is now well into his second administration. And we're going to cover a lot of things that's happened so far in these first 2 weeks. But first thing that we want to go over is we want to talk about immigration. It's something in Fort Bend County. We have the most diverse county in the country. And of course, we have a large immigrant community in Harris County, in Houston as well. And so this is something at the front of everyone's minds. And as a result, people called into the station and said, hey, we want this topic covered. So what we want to do is get the truth out there and put everyone's sort of uncertainties away. Put any irrational fears away. Get the information out there. There's a lot of misinformation out there, so we want to get the truth out there, and so everyone can sleep at night. And on today's show, we have Bobby Eberle, chairman of the Fort Bend County Republican Party. How you doing, Bobby?
Hey, Chris. How's it going, man?
Good.
Yeah, it's good to be here, and I appreciate you putting the show together. I think it's going to be good. It's a lot of information, a lot of misinformation out there being spun up by people that really, prey off fear and keeping people on edge. And I'm glad we get to talk about it and kind of set the record straight, and appreciate being on.
Yeah, and I'd like to say that Bobby is now being nationally recognized. He is a regular guest on Newsmax as well as some other stations. Bobby, can you tell us where people can find you?
Yeah, I was just on NTD News Today, which is more of an international news outlet, but they have offices in D.C. and New York, and they have great programming. I'm often on News Nation and Real America's Voice, but my regular spot is Newsmax. I'm a regular there on a number of their shows, and looking to do more. It's a lot. And anytime I'm on, I try to post it on social media so people can get those clips. And if you miss it, I've got a playlist in my on my channel on YouTube called On the Air. So in addition to my show, which is the 13-minute news hour, you can check out the On the Air. That's all my other news clips. And I invite people to go back. Last week, I was on a station in England, and a great debate with a Democrat who just came unhinged when talking about some of this DEI stuff. So it's very entertaining if people want to check it out.
Great. G2, we have on our other guest on the line is G2. G2, are you there?
I am.
Great. And G2 is played a pretty transformative role in Midwest and in the coast. I would say the political happenings down there. There's a lot of clashes going on between this sort of new element of Republican nationalism, and of course we have the establishment legacy, Democrat, Rhino Republicans, and I think G2's seen that battle up front over there in the Midwest. But I want to start off, Bobby. I'm sorry, man. You kind of got my curiosity. Tell me about this interaction that happened last week.
Oh, my gosh. Well, I've been on a number of shows with this Democrat strategist, and I don't know what it was, but she went off. And so we're starting to talk about DEI and about Trump's first 2 weeks with this program. So I start talking about just the fundamental unfairness of putting someone ahead of someone based on race. And then I actually quoted Martin Luther King, which anyone who knows me knows that I've quoted him for decades. We studied him up close in one of my theology classes, so it comes to mind a lot. Well, as soon as I did that, she went unhinged. It's like, how dare you even bring his name up? And then just started talking about it got to the point where nothing was making sense anymore, and so it ended up I was talking, and she even asked me a question. I said, so you're asking the question? She said, yeah. So I start to answer it, and she says, no, I don't want to hear it anymore. So because I gave her the answer she didn't want to hear. So again, it's pretty entertaining, but it shows that the left, they will, just like you're seeing in some of these debates with cleaning up the government, they will complain just to be on the opposite side. Like in the course of this debate, she actually said that the host said, well, okay, would you prefer an application that doesn't have gender or racial boxes or anything like that? And she said yes. And I said, well, great, we're done. But then she just kept going. I mean, she wants it. She just became totally unglued and didn't make any points. But the thing is that America's fundamentally racist. So we have to have these programs in forever because nothing's going to change. So her solution is to fight racism with racism.
Well, Bobby, don't you know that you're supposed to obey your leftists?
That's right. Yeah.
I mean, come on, Bobby.
That's
You know your spot in life.
Yeah, I shouldn't have
obey the
spoke up.
leftists.
And right, I should have just said yes, ma'am, and it would all been good. But it was a lot of fun, actually. It was. I enjoyed doing that. So many times on Newsmax or other stations, they'll bring me on to get my opinion on some messaging or communications issues or strategy. But I long for the debates. And even when there's a Democrat on, sometimes it doesn't get too back and forth. But this one was the host just like have at it. So it was a lot of fun.
Well, the truth is that it's not about the issue; it's about the leftist. And you know what their whole goal. Their goal is not the betterment of mankind. Their goal is not to protect the small people. Their goal is not to protect the victim. Their goal is to attain the moral high ground so that they can then begin doling out judgments on whomever in whatever way they regard. It puts them in a sort of supremacy position, and it's all about that. It's all about obeying the leftist. And if you don't obey the leftist, then, you know, that cat claws come out at you.
Right.
So, but okay, so you said you're on NTD, and NTD is an international show. And so my question for you is this. You know, again, here in Fort Bend County, people are really concerned about this deportation agenda. Right. And I think they're afraid that their family members are going to be swept up and taken away, or themselves are. And are you hearing that same thing on when you do your rounds in the news cycles?
Yeah, only because, again, it's the left that's spinning it up. I mean, and even you see this in the White House press briefing talking about, you know, oh, there's concern out there and there's a fear among neighborhoods and everything. Well, that is being spun up by the people that oppose these policies. I mean, Trump won overwhelmingly this election cycle, and the number one issue was border security. That was number one. And when you look at breakdowns, exit polling, and other analysis, Republicans, Democrats, Independents, border security was even number one issue for Democrats. And so, you know, the fringe tried to run on abortion and stuff like this, but everyone was talking about the economy, crime, the border. And so what Trump is doing is they focus through his border czar, Tom Homan, to focus on the worst of the worst. In the effort they're calling the worst first, meaning these people that are here, anyone who's crossed the border illegally is violating federal law. They are violating federal law. But what they're focusing on are these thousands and thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands even, that it came in with a known criminal record. So all that Biden was talking about vetting people, that was all bogus. That was all fake, because you had murderers, rapists, gang leaders, drug dealers coming in that are known. It's not just a hypothetical. It's a known. They had a criminal record. Like when people would say, or Trump would joke, but it's not really a joke, of Venezuela emptying their prisons. I believe I saw a stat that crime went down in Venezuela like 70-something%. And because they all came here. And so we have to get those people out. And from day one, that's what they're doing. That's what they're focusing on, is getting the bad people out. They did a raid, I believe it was outside of New York City, where the ethnic population in that neighborhood cheered the ICE agents, because they knew from that point forward their neighborhood would be safer. Their kids could go play. They could have fun outside, because the bad people know where to hide. And they're going to hide in these ethnic neighborhoods and try to disappear into society. But everyone knows they're out there. And so these people, these longtime residents, were cheering that they finally get some safety and peace, because it doesn't matter where you live. As an American citizen, you should be able to wake up in the morning and know that it's safe around you, and you're free from this drugs and crime and sex trafficking and those kind of things. So yeah, they're definitely focusing on the worst first, and they've rounded up over 8,000 people arrested them already. And here's a key point, and other people can jump in. I don't want to
keep going.
dominate.
Don't worry, you're fine.
But one of the things they've done as far as the deportations that I think is critical, and the media doesn't, they refuse to really get the story out, is 97% of those rounded up for deportation were already on deportation orders from the Biden administration. So they're getting people that were already issued deportation orders from the previous administration, but what the previous administration did was just sign a worthless piece of paper. It meant nothing. They didn't do anything. The people were still here committing crimes. And then you have the sanctuary cities that when they do find one of these people, they let them go. Regardless of their record, they just let them go. So they're getting these people, they're shipping them back to their countries, they're shipping them over to Gitmo until we can find something permanent for them in their country of origin. But right now, it's getting them out of the country because they shouldn't have been here in the first place.
Okay, so to summarize everything that you said from an objective standpoint, what it appears that this immigration agenda is it's not to go get your grandma or your grandpa or your cousin Susie, whatever. It is to get a lethal element out of our society, and there is a serious lethal threat here. G2, can you talk a little bit about the threat that immigration, illegal immigration. Can you talk about the threat that illegal immigration poses to the everyday person in America, regardless of race, regardless of any other factor like that? Just innocent people walking down the street. What kind of threat does it pose to them?
Well, when you look at having a massive class of people, a large number of people, and right now we've got about 46 million foreign-born people in this country, say 15% or something, 18%, 17% of the country. It is a massive number of folks that were not born in the United States. Now, the United States has always brought in large numbers of people. I mean, more legal immigrants than any other nation has done, 1 million a year typically, sometimes less, sometimes more. And for a period of time, immigration was shut down so that the country could stabilize after periods of significant surges in immigration. Because, there are a couple of things we need to keep in mind. First of all, the purpose of the American government, or the charge that the American government is working under, is to serve the interests of the American people, not the people of the world, and not the corporations that want low-cost labor. Not the drug cartels who want to traffic children, chemical weapons, in this case fentanyl, and labor across borders for profit. The purpose of the government is not to represent the cartels and the fentanyl dealers and the child traffickers. It's to represent the American people. But the fact of the matter is, these last several administrations, excluding Trump's, didn't serve the American people. They served the world. And they served the globalist organizations that brought in low-cost labor. Now, here's one of the challenges with that. There were a lot of folks brought in to work in the meatpacking plants, say, 15 years ago. And those people were brought in, they replaced U.S. workers, and everything was great. Well, in this round, those people have been replaced by newer low-cost workers because those who came in illegally originally and then eventually became citizens somehow or just stayed for a long time, they started earning local wages. So the government just simply went out and served those companies by bringing in new labor to replace them. The point I'm making is it's an insidious cycle that benefits no one over the long term. So now you're facing this position where you've got a lot of people here legally and a whole bunch that are here illegally. And in those illegal, alien, and fake asylum-seeking populations, almost all of them, not all, but almost all of them have been brought here by these transnational criminal organizations, the drug cartels, who are making billions and billions of dollars trafficking these people. Now, who are they bringing in? Well, they're bringing in labor. They're bringing in a lot of children, as we all know. They've trafficked huge numbers of children. But they're also bringing in their own people, that is, cartel members who come here to expand their groups, right, to expand the presence of their organization. So MS-13 started as a few people that came out of jails in Central America, and pretty soon had 10,000 soldiers in the United States that were killing people from Long Island to California. Then a few call it 18 months ago, we started hearing about a new group called Tren de Aragua. Tren de Aragua shows up in Manhattan and no one had ever heard of them before. They're a Venezuelan group, comes out of a Venezuelan prison. The next thing you know, we hear they're in Chicago. And then we find out that they're taking over, they're seizing control of apartment complexes in Aurora, Colorado. And of course, leftists say that isn't true. It's absolutely true. And then pretty soon we see more reports that this group, Tren de Aragua, a bloody, dangerous group, has operations all over the United States. They're everywhere. And it's not safe for anybody. So to your point earlier, Bobby, I think you made this point well. The government isn't, or you guys both did. The government isn't going around trying to find people who came here legally, who have green cards, or who have work permits, who have come in through a process that was legitimate, and then deporting them. That's not what they're doing. They're not trying to find people who are citizens. If you're a naturalized citizen, you're a citizen just like everybody else. The government isn't coming for you. But people who have come here illegally are going to be deported in large numbers. And that will include the drug cartels. It will include some people that are here for labor. It will include the thousands of terrorists that have come in. It'll include tens of thousands of Chinese Communist Party operatives who have come in, all documented. It's been reported that they're here. What I mean, they're not documented in that they're legal. They're here illegally. All of those groups are going to be targeted for removal and should be, because no other nation outside of now the Western European nations, nothing but Western civilization would allow themselves to be invaded like this. Because frankly, the leaders who have had control of our governments in Western civilization are simply working against their own people for personal profit and gain. And so if you are a citizen, you have nothing to worry about. If you have a green card, a work permit that was obtained legally, you have nothing to worry about. But if you're here illegally, you're going to be deported. And if you came and implemented a fake asylum claim, so as you know, in Sweden, for example, 70% of the people that claimed asylum vacation in the country they claimed asylum from. It cannot be asylum if you vacation in your home country.
I'm not going back to that hellhole, but the beach is nice, right?
Right. You have to protect me from my own country. Give me asylum. Right. By the way, I'll be there next month on vacation.
By the way, can you get my shoulders? I had some suntan lotion on my shoulders. I can't reach that.
It's nuts.
Right. And cut me a lot more checks. And there's another element to this, too, which is that our government and the United Nations and these NGOs have been pumping huge amounts of money into the pockets of those people. That's not available to citizens. It's not available to people with green cards or people that are here with work permits. It's specifically going into these illegal aliens and the people with fake asylum claims. And that has to stop. And that's going to stop, I believe, with the implementation of DOGE. So all we're doing is returning the United States to a rational, legal immigration policy standpoint, to a place where once you apply and you're admitted and either given work permits or given citizenship, then you're here. And you're here under the terms of whatever that legal arrangement are. But
Okay.
the cartels will no longer control our border.
Here is the next concern amongst a large percentage of the Fort Bend and Harris County community. They may be here legally, but they want to have their mother, who is a citizen of a foreign country, come here. They may have their fiance, who's a citizen of a foreign country, come here, and they're concerned. By the way, it took my wife was a resident of a foreign country, and it took us, I want to say, more than 6 months for her to come here, maybe 8 months.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't complaining.
Right.
I was like, okay, what's the process? Let's get it done. So I think it's irrational to think that this is going to be an expedited process. It is what it is. You're moving, people over borders of countries. They have to do the processing. But I guess my question is, will that be affected? Question for you fellas.
Well, no, the legal process. I mean, Trump wants to kind of put a halt to all of this, and we should take a pause until we get this ship righted. But no one is coming after people that have gone through the legal process, regardless of your race, ethnicity, background, country of origin. It doesn't matter. You come here legally, you have that opportunity like no other country to be an American and embrace the American culture and go out and seek your fortune, right, to pursue the American dream. And so people don't need to worry about that. When ICE is going out on these raids, they have warrants. They know exactly who they are looking for. And I think that's important because the media certainly doesn't publicize that. In fact, they go the other way. I want to share one example. When I was on that program debating, as soon as I started talking about the ICE raids, the Democrat brought up a raid in Chicago, saying, "Oh, the ICE went into schools and everything," and I had to correct her. And I hate this when the people will go on the air on a national news program and not know what they're talking about. And in this particular case, and I believe there was one other, the Secret Service was investigating a potential threat, and they showed up, they investigated the threat, they did their job, and they left. The administrators, probably Dems, radicals, said ICE showed up and they're raiding a school. And that got everybody fired up until the government had to set them straight, and they issued a correction. You can Google it. You can look. The AP has a story on it where they issued the correction saying, no, it wasn't ICE. They weren't invading a school. But that's what the left will do. The left will just inflame a story knowing that ICE is making targeted raids against the bad guys. And here's the other thing, too, is that, and Tom Homan said this themselves, and people need to realize this, they are going after the bad guys. And we don't have to worry about this particular thing in Texas, but in areas that they're focusing on with sanctuary cities. He made a good point on the national news the other day, and that is because they have rounded up a few other people in addition to the bad guys when they're doing these raids. And the reason why is because when they're going into these sanctuary cities, rather than apprehending this bad guy and having him in jail and saying, hey, ICE, the bad guy you need and want, he's sitting in this jail, come get him. They let him go. And so he goes and he, infiltrates a neighborhood and he's hanging out with people. And Tom Homan rightfully pointed out that, hey, if you would have just left him in jail, we would have gotten him and we would have gone on our way. Instead, we have to go to where he is. And if we round up other people here illegally, then, so be it. They shouldn't be here, and they shouldn't be associating with a drug dealer or a sex trafficker or someone like that, a murderer or a rapist. If you are associating with someone that is that bad, then guess what? You might not be in the safest position. But everyone, rank and file people going about doing their lives, ICE is not looking for you, and they will never visit you.
Yeah, right. So again, all evidence shows that the agenda, the objective of the Trump administration is to take out a lethal element of our society, and that it's not going to affect the everyday processes of having someone come from overseas that's a family member. I don't see any evidence of that being changed, but I think that there's a huge misinformation campaign to sort of distort the truth, to malign the Trump administration while they're freshly into just their first 2 weeks. G2, do you have an answer to that?
Yeah, I don't think that the Trump administration, look, the reality is all of these leftists, like the one, Bobby, you were talking to on the air, they are really struggling right now because they have been trained for now, 10 years, to hate Donald Trump with a passion that is so deep it overrides all logic. They've been trained that there's nothing more important in the world than teaching children about sexuality and about the going into these middle schools and pushing their sexual agenda, these bizarre, radical things. All of those folks are struggling right now. And a lot of those people work in corporate media, so they're pushing crazy stories. And then there's the political element. Look, as all this money laundering comes to an end through USAID, for example, that's in the news now, there is going to be tremendous strain on these leftist organizations that have been living off of grants from federal government. So these people have a lot of reasons to make Trump and the administration seem like they're dark, evil forces. The problem is it's simply not true. So I think we're going to continue seeing this disinformation campaign we've been living with for 10 years, the Russia collusion hoax and hoax after hoax. We're going to continue seeing that. But in the end, what the American people are already beginning to see, again, is an administration that's representing their interests. And that means American people who were born here and are legitimate citizens, those who came here and were naturalized, and to some extent those that have green cards because they have an interest in the United States, even though they're not citizens. You're seeing for the first time an administration, well, the second time, because 17, 18, and 19 we had this, but we're seeing an administration negotiating with the world on those people's behalf, on the citizens' behalf, and on the nation's behalf, and it's making the nation's internal enemies, let's call them, furious. It's making the radicals who are obsessed with this woke sexuality, which is really a religion, it's making them furious. And it's making the millions who've been living off a fat contract that have been pulling money out of the federal government and returning nothing to the people, nothing to the nation. It's making them really nervous because their money may be about to dry up.
Yeah, I really think that we're at a potentially a paradigm shift of epic proportions. We're seeing foundation shift in our world. And, you know, on that immigration point, I'd just like to say one last thing, which is Lizzie Fletcher right over here in Bel Air, Sunnyside. She was all for that border being open. She was confronted by her constituents, and she scoffed them off and said, maybe we'll put up some wire, something of that sort. And those people coming over that border, you know, of course, all of the travesties that are happening with the trafficking and everything that happens when the people are brought over. But when they come here, they're going to go and replace. Sunnyside is largely a minority community, and those are the first ones that are going to lose their jobs to this new immigrant element. So in every way, shape, and form, I think that every lawful American in this country has a vested interest in seeing President Trump's immigration plan go through to its full fruition. Everyone from Sunnyside to Bel Air and everywhere else in Lizzie Fletcher's district. And everyone needs to ask the question, why is Lizzie Fletcher okay for this? Why is she actually advocating for it? I think we need to question her intentions.
Yeah, and as G2 said, I mean, the Democrats will spin and just be so anti-Trump that their arguments don't even make sense. And this is where I want to challenge the listeners a little bit, because you have to take some initiative to find out the truth. And if people are getting spun up because they're hearing only one side and not really looking at the issue, well, some of that blame is actually, it falls on them, because the information's out there. You have to look for it, and you have to look at the situation. And here's just one example. So Biden comes into office. He opens the border. He has this flood, and they say, oh, it's just seasonal. You know, there's no open borders. Well, we showed that was wrong. It just kept going up and up and up. His Department of Homeland Security guy enabled all this. He said there's no crisis at the border. The border's not open. People continued to flood. So what did the Democrats finally do? They said, well, the only way we can fix this is through legislation. We have to have this legislation. It really didn't do anything that it was supposed to do, but we killed that. And they tried to make that a political issue, saying, hey, this all could be solved if Trump and Trump's team, because he wasn't in office, would support this. Well, now we know just in 2 weeks that was all just bogus. That was all just another bill that would actually have made the problem worse. But you didn't need legislation. Biden caused this. Mayorkas implemented it. And Trump in 2 weeks has cut it basically down to zero. 93% reduction in these illegal border crossings in just 2 weeks. 8,000 apprehended. They're being deported. Colombia said, no, you can't have them. Then they took them. Venezuela said, no, we can't.
That's right.
You can't send your people back to us. They're taking them back. And not only that, giving us American prisoners in return. We are doing the job the American people wanted, and the left still can't acknowledge it. They still can't acknowledge it.
Well, again, I mean, I'm going to sleep well at night because I live about maybe a half a mile away from the on-road, the West Belfort on-ramp to the HOV lane on 59, and that's become a haven for prostitutes, for homeless shelter, people living in shanties, and to illegals. And that's a stone throw from my house.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not good. I have to take my son over there every day to get on the on-road to take him to school. And just seeing that blight, it's not for a child's eyes. And so I think I'll sleep a little bit better at nights knowing that this stuff is being taken care of. I look forward to that area being cleaned up again. It's going to be a great thing for our neighborhood. And it poses a threat to the little town that I live in. I live in a town, Meadows Place. We have an abundant number of police. But it's just once that crime just creeps over into our town one time, then all of a sudden our own town becomes vulnerable. So it's just great all around. Go, G2, what's up?
What's really interesting, Bobby, you lay out those numbers a few minutes ago, right? And the thing is that the purpose, really the penultimate, the major purpose of the federal government is to protect the nation, defend the nation, right? Mm-hmm. And so you deploy the military into its stated purpose, defending the nation, along that southern border. The cartels took a couple of shots at them, but they're not going to be able to take on, the 100th Airborne and the Marine Corps. So it basically shuts down the invasion. In other words, to your point, there was no legislation necessary. What was necessary was for the President of the United States to tell the Department of Homeland Security and the military, you will defend this nation's interests. You will secure that border. You will stop these international crime organizations, these cartels, from controlling that border. Boom. In just a couple of weeks, the numbers fall dramatically and things improve greatly. It's incredible. It wasn't really that hard. It was about the will to do it. And so, what you just laid out is something that was available that could have been done by any other president, but is only done by this one. And Chris, to your point, you look at these South Chicago neighborhoods, you look at this Tren de Aragua in Aurora, Colorado, and MS-13 on the, up in Long Island and in Virginia and all over the country. These are incredibly violent groups. The American people are absolutely not prepared to deal with that. And it's time, it's well past time that the government do so, and it's now starting to happen. So I think we can all celebrate that a little bit.
Yeah, as I understand it, G2, those Chicago neighborhoods, the concern of every person, every Indianan, every person from the state of Indiana, they're all white-knuckled concerned that crime, that those gangs could spill over the state line from Illinois, from Chicago, Illinois, into Indiana, and that's a constant concern in those neighborhoods, if I understand correctly. Is that right?
Oh, it absolutely is. There was actually an incursion a few years ago, like 2 years ago now, I think 3, where a group was coming out of Illinois. They were going down into Indiana to burn a shopping mall and sort of, destroy it. So I guess it would have been 4 years ago. And the mayor of that town changed parties from Democrat to Republican, rolled everything from trucks full of sand and cement trucks and canine units and police, and just put up a barricade and stopped it, and just said, we'll not let you take one more step, and turn those people back to Illinois. It is a real threat. It actually does happen. And of course it gets no media, but it is really now a nationwide issue. It's Texas who's suffered greatly from this invasion. What Texans have been forced to suffer is really just inexcusable, but it's also nationwide.
Right. And what's interesting is that, the Democrats, and I'm talking about this ruling elite establishment, governing Democrats, they're so out of touch, which the election results proved it, but there's other examples outside of the 2024 elections that just drive it home, and we use Chicago. I mean, Brandon Johnson, he's so much worse than the Lori Lightfoot that he replaced. But
that's impossible,
right? The protests that you see at these city council meetings and other events, they aren't white suburban voters. These are Chicago inner city members of the black community that will vote Democrat 99% of the time, and they are railing on him because this is an issue, again, that transcends political party or ideology. But these far leftists in the positions of leadership, they just ignore all of that to push this agenda, and that's why they're being rejected wholesale.
All right, guys, we're going to change the subject, but I do want to say one thing. Thank you both, because, my goodness, I think that, it's like I didn't realize it till just now. That is one breath of fresh air that I can take. I mean, it's just like one constant nagging concern that I can just take a deep breath and say, thank goodness we can move along. Mm-hmm. Feels good. Okay, so one of the things that I found interesting is that right now with this current move that President Trump's making, where he's talking about eliminating the income tax and talking about creating an exterior income system for the government, it's bringing up this debate amongst historians, and it's really fascinating to watch these conversations. And essentially what I'm learning from this is that the country was run on tariffs well into the early 1900s. That was the basis of how the country attained its wealth and its income. And the tariffs were the right way to do it because it protected our industries, and in doing so, it protected our income. And so what happened is that the crony business class, with all of their maneuverings that they do, they knew this, the smart devils that they are, and what they did is they began to lobby President Wilson to get rid of that income tax, or excuse me, to get rid of those tariffs. To get rid of those tariffs, and they started to plant the seeds in his head for an income tax. Okay, now what's the difference between tariffs versus an income tax? Tariffs purposely protect your income. They protect your trade. They protect your right to go to work every day. Whereas an income tax is like a cancer on your wealth. It's constantly cutting into your wealth, eroding your wealth, chipping away at your wealth until we're all impoverished, until we're all living on loans, right? Because we can't make it from we're now living paycheck to paycheck, okay? And so this was a concerted effort by the business class, by the what I call the banker class of that time. They understood this, and being the evil, deceptive men that they were, they lobbied Wilson to get rid of those tariffs and replace them with an income tax so that the rest of us would sit impoverished for the next 100 years. And so when President Trump brings this up, it's these debates are breaking out, this re-education of our people is breaking out. Of course, then what the business class did is they paid off the academics, right? All of these business schools are funded by some billionaire. We all know billionaires don't have the best interests in mind. And what did they teach us? The Hawley-Smoot Act. Hawley-Smoot, if you do one tariff, it's just like popcorn pop, and tariffs pop up off all across the planet, and the country dies. And these historians are saying, no, that's not the truth. It's they're always misconstruing with the truth about what really happened. And I think that we're in this time where we're sort of re-exploring all these ideas that were put in our heads during our educational years. And I for one, I'm willing to hear and see what President Trump has in store with these new economic ideas. Bobby, tell me what you think.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is a fascinating concept, and that's why this emergence of Trump has really made me feel warm inside, because I grew up, I've been in Texas since I was 11, but I grew up was born in Chicago. My dad's a steel worker, union guys and stuff. And, but I always felt like the conservatism, the Republican Party really should and does represent this middle class. And I realized that, hey, I'm conservative through and through, but that conservatism ends on our shores. I'm not for policies that on a theoretical scale help the global system of whatever. We exist as a country to protect Americans and to develop Americans and ensure that they can pursue life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So I love these policies that put America first. And when you're talking about the tariffs, it's so interesting how the media and people will just jump on it without giving it a chance to work. He's swinging these around like a sledgehammer. And one great example that I want to bring up is just the quick little outrage that Colombia had. It was only for like a day, right? They said they were going to play tough. They're not going to accept these bad guys in. And Trump was threatening tariffs. And all of a sudden, the media is just saying, wow, this can affect your coffee. This coffee could just go outrageous. Well, let's look at it as not just a penalty, but an opportunity, because I was doing some looking around, just research that anyone can do, and Brazil and Vietnam make way more coffee than Colombia does. So it's not this death sentence that coffee would go up. It's an opportunity for other countries to break into the market too. If Colombia retaliates with raising coffee, well, Brazil and Vietnam can bring in other markets and sell cheaper coffee. It doesn't affect the whole industry. It affects these countries, and he's using it in a very, very targeted way. And as soon as they started complaining about Canada and Mexico caved. He wanted the fentanyl and the border reduced as far as fentanyl and the border to be secure. Now we're getting 10,000 Mexican troops, and Canada is supplying additional security as well to stop that problem. And it has been working every single time.
Yeah, nationalism keeps people honest.
Yes.
Plain and simple. G2, what do you think about this new tariff system?
Well, I think what you just said is really on point. So let's think about that Canada-Mexico situation a little more. So we're supposed to have some kind of a free trade arrangement with them, but somehow if you have a plant that's near the Texas border but in Mexico, and it's called a maquiladora, you can ship up into the United States. It's quite simple. But to turn around and ship your product into Mexico is very challenging. You get into really complicated tax issues and other things that make it virtually impossible for a maquiladora to ship into the country it's located in. So tariffs are one barrier to trade, but not the only barrier to trade. And countries like China use a complex system of export duties and export credits and government subsidies and subsidies for things like highly finished products that they want to capture market share for. It isn't so simple. And the only country that has refused to take its own interest into consideration in trade policy is the United States. Mm-hmm. And as a result, we have perpetual trade deficits with every country. Every economist that's gone to business school, to your point, Chris, has been trained that that's a good thing, that somehow the United States is more wealthy as a result of that. Now, the United States is a complicated economy, and that is not the reason that the U.S. is more wealthy. But what we have done is lost critical skills because we don't have people doing the jobs they used to do. Now they're all baristas. Mm-hmm. We have lost critical industries. We can't make basic pharmaceuticals. We can't produce the rare earths that we used to produce that are necessary for guidance systems for fighter aircraft. Now, we make a little more rare earth now, but there was a period, I don't know if it was 10 or 15 years, we didn't make any. We didn't mine them. We didn't process them. We had none. If we want to go make one of these crazy solar cells, we have to get the material from China. They're the only ones that process it, the silicon, the wafers. So we've made ourselves depend upon the Chinese Communist Party's goodwill for fundamentally critical products that we need to run our country. That's stupid. That's not smart. It's not some sophisticated plan developed at Harvard Business School. That is where it comes from. That is just stupid. Now, millions of Americans have gotten rich selling out their country, but that's not sustainable. It has to end. So what Trump has been doing, the Colombia example is a perfect one. Yes, we have alternatives that we can buy that from. And let's face it, we really are a market these nations need. So can Colombia just go sell that coffee to China? Maybe. But think about coal. China's now saying they're going to put a tariff on our coal. Go ahead. Mm-hmm. Because that means they have to pull more coal out of Australia, right? And out of, they get actually most of their coal from Australia. Iron ore, if they want to take some of our iron ore, they're going to have to take more out of Brazil and Australia. But my point is, if you're going to redirect the coal that we're shipping into the power plants they're building in China, and they're building as many power plants as they can, they've been building 2 a week for a long time. If you're going to say they're not going to take our coal, they're going to have to buy it elsewhere, primarily Australia, but also places around the world. That's going to cost them a premium. That will raise the global price of coal, and we'll sell our coal to somebody else, and it'll be more competitive. Mm-hmm. So the people who say that this tariff is a tax on the people and it's going to cause everything to go up in price and we have no alternative, it's going to wreck the economy, always assume nothing else changes. To your point, Bobby, there's nowhere else to go to get coffee. We have to get it for Colombia. Mm-hmm. There's nowhere else for us to sell our coal. So they're going to pull more out of Australia, and we're not going to sell it to where Australia was selling it. Mm-hmm. It's naive and silly.
Yeah, right.
The truth is, this is a great strategy. It's working effectively, and it's going to change the future of the country because we simply must negotiate on behalf of the United States like every other nation does.
Right. Yeah. And see, the thing is that where the media is lacking too, and the Democrats is like they clearly can't process things as fast as G2 can. Because they are shell-shocked. They are literally shell-shocked. As soon as they start to have some kind of tariff argument, it's done. this is a 2-day issue and it's done and we're on to the next one. And they can't keep up with Trump.
Well, how dare you Americans think for yourselves?
Right.
Don't you know that you're supposed to listen to and obey the talking heads on CNN and so on and so forth?
Exactly. So, right. The worst thing in the history of the world is when the grassroots, the American people, the silent majority actually speak out.
Yeah.
I mean, they can't stand it.
It's an amazing time. Okay, guys. Well, I'm going to bring you another hot topic, another thing that we're not supposed to question, and that is the concept of foreign aid. This assumption that you are always to have foreign aid expelled from our country, and don't you dare question that assumption. So, early in my career, I had a 1-year stint as a USAID contractor. USAID is the United States Agency for International Development, and what they essentially do is they give your hard-earned tax dollars to people around the world. They're just spilling out our cash everywhere. While you go to work every day, USAID is just handing that cash away for no good reason at all. And so what would happen is I had this one year stint, and I had an opportunity to continue down that career path, and I just couldn't have it. I did appreciate my time overseas. I worked in a city called Pavlodar, Kazakhstan for a year and a half. Incredible experience. But it was an incredible experience for me, but it was nothing to make a career out of. What good? I'm not building any value, right? I'm not building any value taking the money of Americans and just giving it away to people. There's no skill development in there. There's no value. So I did not take that job. But as we now know, I believe that President Trump has thrown out the idea of possibly ending USAID, which of course would then be a big blow towards the whole idea of foreign aid. What do you guys think? Do we need foreign aid? Are we going to die without foreign aid? Or, tell me what you're thinking. Tell me what you think, Bobby.
All right. Well, first of all, they were very clever in the 60s, I believe, in the Kennedy administration when they came up with that acronym, because people associated with all this good doing, a bunch of do-gooders out there giving aid. And it's the Agency for International Development, and it's basically a slush fund. But let me get into a little bit of some foreign policy here. Maybe G2 and I can debate or something. But here's my idea. When you look at what is our global threat, right? Our global threat is Marxism, it's communism, and so when you're talking about foreign aid, it should always be directed towards enhancing our position, and our position meaning the Western, our allies, and us, to be anti-communist, to fulfill a mission of thwarting communism and putting that down, because you don't see France going and invading England, right? Or Germany's not invading France. We get along. This Western democracy's Judeo-Christian values, it means something, and it's meant something very significant to world history. Marxism and this anti-religious and atheist, it's counter to that. So when you're talking about aid, it has to be used as a way to, it's not just a free ticket. It has to be used to leverage our position and our standing and our values. And what USAID, what they're discovering, is not just the waste and fraud, which I'm so glad they're doing that in a general sense, but specifically, it's going to advance causes that are
communistic.
Yes, exactly. But they're existing on their own little kingdom, and they're so freaked out that, oh my gosh, we are a part of the executive, and the executive is making us report to him. How dare he? And the media, Chuck Schumer and all of these people, are actually questioning that. And how dare he enforce this, which it is his right and his right alone. It's not the bureaucrats that control this. So we need to clean house, but we also need to make sure we get back to this idea that foreign aid is directed to our end goal and our interests as a country. And so I do believe in engaging in the world. I do believe in the exportation of democracy, so to speak, because that keeps the world safer vis-a-vis the communist threat. And that's kind of where
when I was working in USAID, I can tell you all we heard about was these other organizations that were in the same fields as us, and it was the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, and George Soros Foundation, and those organizations are pretty
See, I love
leftist.
it when you say IMF because I always think of Impossible Missions Force and Ethan Hunt and Mission Impossible. But I digress.
No.
Go ahead.
That's a better way to think of it. Yeah, because when I think of IMF, I think of commies.
Right,
I think of commies. I think they're all commies, man.
We gotta get them.
So I think that if we shut down USAID, we'll probably be defunding a huge amount of the communist element around the world. Right. G2, what do you think?
Yeah, where am I wrong, G2?
Well, I don't think you're wrong at all, and I think picking up on that idea, you've got, again, huge amounts of money, hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars that have been shipped overseas. No one knows where.
Mm-hmm.
No one knows how it was used. It is a giant black box that launders billions of dollars. And when you see these members of Congress who never mention USAID, most Americans had never heard of it until just now, and suddenly we've got members of Congress rallying outside the building and telling us how critical the place is. 10,000 employees doing what? None of this is being done in our interest. And USAID has acted to destabilize nations that are not in actions that are not clearly in the interest of the American people, right? I mean, no one actually really explained to us why Bashir al-Assad had to go. But they spent $15 billion getting him out. And who'd they give that money to? They gave that money to the al-Qaeda Taliban types who the United States spent 20 years fighting. You know, think about the money.
Oh, you mean those innocent rebels?
Freedom fighters.
That's right. I'm sorry. Right. Fighters. Yeah, that's right. I even got it wrong. Jeez.
Yeah, you know, it's so ludicrous.
Mm-hmm.
They're sending $40 to $80 million a week to the Taliban, Al Qaeda group. You know, it's sort of hard to distinguish. Go through people whose names are Bin Laden, and it's funding all these war fighters all over the place. And it's cash being delivered by the United States to someone that we spent 20 years fighting. It's no wonder that many of our service members are questioning the value of what they did, because they're looking at what the government is doing and saying it's not even consistent with why they sent me overseas to fight. And we're a nation whose government has been taken over by radicals and lunatics who have used all of this money printing and all of these agencies that no one tracks, and the lack of oversight from Congress has enabled this. And they just pushed billions all over the world. And no one knows where it's gone, and much of it has worked against our interests. So I agree with you completely. This agency, I think it should be shut down.
Yeah.
I don't think it could be reformed. I think it should be closed, and I think there are other agencies that should be closed because they're working in the interest of some other ideology, not on behalf of the American people.
That's it right there. That summarizes it right there. I mean, they are working against our interests.
Well, again, I mean, Bashir al-Assad of Syria. I mean, the man was he's a Muslim, and he was a Muslim that was protecting the Muslim people of Syria as well as the Christian communities in Syria. I'm not sure if people know this, but the Christian communities in Syria celebrated Bashir al-Assad. So why is USAID opposing him? It really makes me question, you know, who are the real bad guys in these that we're always told, you know, in these storybooks. It's really causing me to question the in history that we've been taught. But fellas, I appreciate your time, and I know we're all on tight schedules. We've used up our hour here, so I think it's been great. And yeah,
Chris, you putting together this show to help the community. It's a really great service. This is good, and hopefully we get some feedback from listeners, because you did a great thing. This was really good.
Thank you, sir. I really appreciate that. And G2, I want to thank you as well. So,
thanks for allowing me to participate. This has been fun, guys, and I think it is critical, and I'm glad that these discussions are happening, to your point, so that people just have a better understanding of what's going on. Corporate media is lying to us every day, and we present an opportunity for folks to hear maybe the other side of the story and give it some thought. So thanks for letting me participate.
Yeah, and I'd like to thank Radio Dabang, FM 99.5 Radio Dabang, and I'd like everybody to know that Radio Dabang brings both sides of the political spectrum at the local level to this little studio here off of 59 South in Houston, Texas. So I want to thank them as well. All right, guys. Well, Chris Heasley with the Chris Heasley Radio Show. We will be here Saturday, 10 a.m. with one more Hot